All right, so I was taking care of some sticker residue with Goo Gone, uh, which, if you don't know about, it smells like garbage and it will take stickers off, but it's going to smell like a flammable mess for a while right after you use it. Anyway, tangent. So I figured since I've got all these chemicals out anyway, I might as well work on another fixing project for tight joints on the SIC Faiz. If you have had the pleasure of opening this toy, you'll notice that you can hear it right there. The hips are locked up right out of the package. And if you saw my previous video on Shinkocho Seiho Kamen Rider Black, then you know that I use shock oil to loosen those joints. And it really is just like a mess of tolerances. Like the knee is loose, and the hip is locked. The other hip is just as bad. It might even be worse. Anyway, so I figured this time I would talk through what I'm doing so that you can see for yourself what it takes to fix one of these. It's not hard. I have my little toothpicks. That is what you're going to use to put the shock oil into the joint. And this is the shock oil that I use. I got this from a hobby shop near me. It's an RC car shock absorber fluid. So that's specifically what you're looking for. You want it to be silicone based so that it doesn't deteriorate the plastic. You don't want to use anything petroleum on plastic like this. Now, I don't know the science behind it. I just know that it will eventually ruin the plastic. And you want to use the tiniest bit of this oil. It's 80 weight, which means it's extremely viscous. So if you put too much on the joint, it's going to become very loose. And forgive me for saying so much, because I just don't edit these videos yet. So I've taken the figure apart already from the easiest points of access. Don't struggle to take the figure apart. I promise it's more trouble than it's worth if you think you're going to get more clearance. It's really just to get access to some of these joints. And we can already see there's not a lot of room to get in there. So this is going to be a learning process. However, the joint does stick at the kick as well as the swivel. So we are going to lubricate both sides of the joint if we can. If not, this is a display figure. This is obviously it's an extremely posable figure, but we don't need it to be like play ready 24/7. It can be just good enough to not break when we pose it, but we'll do our best. Anyway, get the joints as accessible as possible. I'm going to lay my pieces down on this tiny Daiso cutting mat. I use the back of it because it's gonna get greasy, and it smells like garbage. I cannot stress that enough. This thing, I've aired it out. I've put it in the windowsill. I've put it in direct sunlight. I've put it with dryer sheets. It smells. I can't describe how it smells. It smells horrendous. So anyway, again, tangent. We're gonna take the shock oil. What I do is I take a toothpick and I dip just the tip in, and you'll see I still have a pretty sizable drop on there. You do not want that much. Scrape off as much as you can. All you're really going to see is moisture on the tip of the toothpick. That's actually not making it any better, but that's fine. You're just going to see moisture on the tip of the toothpick. That's plenty. That's all you're going to need. So we're going to take this, and the first thing we're going to do, if I can get it to focus, is we're going to try to get it in here and see if that helps the kick. It should. We're going to get it in as deep as it can go and just twist it. You're just going to put a layer of that down. And let me put this here so that it doesn't get all over the place. And then just manipulate the joint, and you can already hear it. It still has a squeak to it, but the resistance is almost not there anymore. This is still an issue, and I really don't know how we're going to get to that. But we're going to come back to it, actually. Oh, man. So let's get the other joint while we're here. Now, this has enough on it that we can still get it in there. I promise you, just the tiniest bit is more than enough. When I first started doing this, it was for the Kamen Rider double figure arts, the very first double figure arts that came out with the terrible proportions in the middle feet. And I overdid it because the hips on those were so loose and so wobbly. But now, due to the factor of age, I can't actually tell which ones I over lubricated and which ones the plastic has just split over time. I mean, I can tell by looking at the figure up close and seeing which is broken, but the looseness of the joint is the same either way. So eventually, like all things, these toys will age and they will fail on us and they won't be the same. And I think part of the beauty of collecting is understanding that and appreciating it for what it is. I have a lot of broken and repaired figures on my shelf that I have repaired and that they just mean something to me still. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure onto the inner thigh here and see if I can separate the joint enough to get the toothpick underneath. And I kind of can, actually, but I did splinter it off in there. That's fine. Ah, look at that. All right. So let me get a piece of junk paper over here to put this down on. Yeah, this is going to stain everything if it touches it, so don't put it on anything you like. That was not even the joint that I did it on. Not enough, not enough. The other option that you can do is taking these things apart further. If you put this piece into almost boiling water, and that's the key factor here, almost boiling water. Boiling water will work, but it will work too well, and it might warp some of the thinner pieces. Now, this figure is very delicate and very intricately sculpted, so I'm not going to risk putting it into even hot water because I'm worried that some of these pieces will split. But if you had a figure that maybe you weren't as worried about being rough with, you put it into that almost boiling water and the parts will pop off. It will be a lot easier to manipulate those pieces. That's still squeaky, actually. I might have to bring another drop in there. Less is always better with this. And the less you use, you can always add more, but it is so hard to take away. I've tried everything from Dawn to 409 to grease remover on some ones that have just needed to have the joints cleaned out. It's usually stuff that I buy secondhand that I know the seller has attempted one of these fixes themselves. And let's see. I mean, it squeaks, but it's still moving well. I don't know if I should bug it anymore. Well, you know, there's another access point up here. Maybe we just put another little drop up top. Okay. I mean, you hear it. It's squeaky, but it's okay. And you can see the greasy spots. And we didn't even touch that. It's just that's where it's leaking out from. So, I'm going to use some toilet paper. Just because you can really get it in there. Yeah, it's pooling up. So, the next thing I do when I'm really having trouble with a joint, or if a joint is very stuck, is I will add a little more on there and let capillary action just take it through the joint. And as much as I don't like doing that because it could go too far, it's still not so much that it's going to ruin the figure. And it's better to have the joint be a little too lubricated, especially if it's very tight, than having the figure break. All right, that's very tight. I wish this was a different joint. The swivel on this just feels so basic for $100+ figure. Look at that, it's all just pulled up in there. So you see, this is not something that you just like, oh, I got this. You pick it up, you slap some drops of oil on there, and then everything's good to go. You really have to play with it. Now, back in the day, you used to be able to take figure arts apart, and that's something I plan on making a video about in the future too. When the extending hip joint broke on old figure arts, it was actually very easy. See, I just pulled that leg off so I can see if I can access more of this joint. Anyway, on old figure arts with the extending hip joint, it was actually very easy. Let's just use this figure as an example, but if you remember on old figure arts, the hip would pull down so that it would extend and give you more forward movement. I can't even demonstrate on this because it's so locked up. It would give you more forward movement and let you get the poses into more hips up, extreme crouching poses. Those extending joints would break over time, or sometimes right out of the package. On old figure arts, there was always a piece that hid a screw. And if you could pry that piece off, it was glued or sonic welded sometimes, but it usually will come off with a little pressure. You could access the screw and take the joint off. You could also do that if you needed to lubricate the joint. But new figure arts, any ones that still have that extending hip, they're still assembled the same way, but there's no screw. It's sonic welded. So there's really no way to fix it unless you have some higher level repair skills. All right, we can see a lot more of this joint now, but it's really not helping us fix this. At least the outer swivel. The inside, I think I can access more now. Get a little drop of shock oil on here again. And because the toothpick is wood, it's always going to stay saturated. So you need to remember that. You don't need to put a lot more on there. Get it in there. Now this joint goes all the way down, so maybe it will access something that we can drip through and really get into that joint. I really hope the YouTube algorithm, I mean, I don't really use YouTube as much as Instagram, but I really hope the algorithm doesn't flag this as something gross, because it sure looks like it on the camera. All right, so let's move it around, and it is still, man, that is just wild. It is so tight. I see where the friction is too. It's right, I got it on my fingers. It's right in there. You can kind of feel it when you move it, that's where the most friction is. I guess the only other option would be to get a visible drop on the toothpick like that, and then just kind of, okay, so that was not working out. So I did get some just boiling water right here, and we're gonna, I took the other leg off too so that we don't damage anything too severely, and we're just gonna dunk this in. This water is hot enough that I don't want to touch it, but it's not so hot that if I do, it's gonna burn me. I know that that's not really a good metric to use. Also, a behind the scenes peek into the making of this video. The abrupt cut is because this gigantic spider kind of sauntered its way over here while I was filming, and the noise I made was completely inhuman. And I wish I kept the cut where I reacted to it because it really is something to be heard. All right, so we heated this up. Normally I use chopsticks to pull these out, but I don't have any with me right now. All right, and let's see if we can pull this off now. Oh no. Oh yeah, that is not going. That's not even budging. Wow. All right, all that heat for nothing. And we just soaked our silicone oil in that water, so we gotta give that cup a good scrub before we use it again. Man, I really was hoping this was on like a ball. That would just make it so much easier. You can see that this is not gonna come apart. It's got some pegs, but that doesn't actually mean that it is something you can disassemble. You can see it starting to separate, and if I got a spudger in there, I might be able to pry some of it apart. And all of that is in service of really just fixing a tight joint. So I'm gonna use toilet paper again, and we're just gonna dry it off. The other trick that, I don't know if you saw the other video, but the other trick that I did is I changed the shape of the toothpick, and that helps sometimes. Man, this thing is really giving me the business. At least now we're a little softer that we can move this joint. At some point, I'm kind of a lunkhead when it comes to this stuff. At some point, I get brazen enough that I will just start yanking on stuff. And I have fixed stuff that way, just by brute forcing my way into figuring out how it comes apart. Now, I can actually pry that a little bit now and see where the joint connects. Oh man, that is a tight fit. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I have this little pair of pliers. Yeah, these are rusted to hell, but this is a sentimental pair of pliers, if one could be such a thing. But trust me, they are. So I'm gonna get another toothpick. And last time I just cracked it a little bit to give it a bend, but this time I'm gonna compress it until it's thin. You can use a piece of paper too, but it's so imprecise, you're just gonna get oil everywhere. It's not worth it. Give it a real good squeeze. Give it a vengeful squeeze. All right, thin. And we are gonna overdo it now because we just want a victory. So more than I recommend using. I'm gonna put a little pressure, and I'm gonna get it under there. You see I'm getting it everywhere too because I use too much, but that's fine. We want this to work. And this figure is so heavily layered that you're really not going to see any of that stuff. So let's see. Did we get it? I mean, it's still squeaking, but we've got some movement from it. Try getting the other side. The idea is that moving the joint is going to spread this stuff around on its own, but sometimes, you know, you got to give it a little push and get it on more than one side. It's still squeaking, but I'm somewhat content that that worked. Okay. Making his crotch all greasy. Gotta clean him up. That's disgusting. Not cleaning him up. That's disgusting. That's not disgusting at all. Disgusting is talking about it like we're children, but that's okay. I am a child. All right, I'm gonna do the other one. This is definitely a yeet or be yeeted moment, which is an unfortunate philosophy of which I live by. All right, we're gonna get in there. I wish I could see the joint. It would just make me feel so much better if I could see it. If I knew that what was screwing it up was me or just the design. I'm gonna swivel it around. I mean, I know it's working now because this is the one that wouldn't budge at all before, and now we're getting at least some movement out of it. Hope the capillary action takes over. Oh, it's everywhere on this thing. That's okay. Just gonna wipe it up. Some of this is just water from the boiling water, or just boiling water. I'm gonna get a little cleaner and just degrease it as best as I can. Like I said, it's still gonna be greasy to the touch because this stuff is a heavyweight oil and it's just never gonna go away, the greasiness, but that's okay. Like I said, we're gonna cover most of this up. So, oh Jesus, you hear that? Take another drop of this. Put it back in the joint where we started. It's not a project that you're going to finish in one shot. It is something you're going to have to chip away at, and it's just the safest way to do it too, so you don't end up breaking something. Man, that is just the amount of tension on that joint is just wild. I got this on sale, so I'm not going to cry too much about it. And I don't know. It's a toy. I have a philosophy about this stuff, like I said. The way it is part of the object. If the object is to be viewed as a piece of art, then if the art is flawed, it's part of the art. And that's okay. In the end, especially if you've been a collector for a long time like me, it becomes a bit of a conversation piece where you can say, this piece is flawed. I have an old reissue Takara Gaugiger that is just the most brittle piece of junk toy. I mean, it's a beautiful toy, but it's so brittle. It's so poorly made. The plastic is terrible, and it cost a lot of money. It has fallen apart in so many different ways and been repaired in so many, with different techniques and with different experimental materials, that I've just given up on ever having a complete figure. And at this point, it's just a conversation piece. All right, that's gonna have to be good enough. Unfortunately, this is maybe one of hundreds of these figures that I've done this to that we've not been able to get rid of the squeak, but we did get the joint to move, and that sometimes that's the best you can do. Like I said, the only other option is to just go ham and hope capillary action can take over and get a visible drop on there. Tension the joint as best you can. Man, you can't even see in there anymore. And just get it in there and hope for the best. I mean, that's the most I'm going to do with this now. I mean, if this works, I'll do the other side too, and then I'll just maybe cut the video and pretend that I thought of it from the beginning. But I don't think it's going to work, and I've got oil all over my hands now. Let's get some more toilet paper. And some cleaner, and we'll just degrease this area. He's gonna smell so lemony in his nether regions when he's done. I mean, it's not worth the possibility of getting oil all over parts of the figure that you don't want silicone getting on. All right, so let's reassemble. Let's just leave it as is. So, like I said, these parts can be a little greasy. They can be a little, like something you don't want to put your fingers on, because we're not going to put our fingers on them. They're going to be covered. Most of this joint is going to be covered by the armor pieces. So I always leave my pieces like knolled in a way that when I do this, not on camera, I'll leave them knolled in a way that I know what the orientation is and I know how they're going to go back. It also just makes it a lot quicker to put everything together when everything is in a place that makes sense. And it's ball joints, it's pegs. It's going to go back together very easily. You're just going to pop it all back on. It came off easily too. And yeah, I guess, with the leverage of the joint attached, you still have some clearance. That knee is so loose. That's just crazy. I don't know if I would be upset if I paid full price for this figure. I might be. Nah, maybe not. I do like that the belt looks like it's intentional to come off, considering nobody can keep the belt for more than 5 minutes in Faiz. And yeah, I guess it's looser. The figure's great. Let me cover that back up before I spill it, because I'm a gorilla and I'm gonna spill it. Put it there. Oh yeah, I usually use this roll of tape to keep everything from spilling or tipping over. Sometimes you can whatever, let's not bother with that and look any stupider than we already do. So I'm just gonna move this real quick. So yeah, it's got great proportions. It's layered, it's chunky, it's a great design. I took some of his accessories out. I don't know where I put them right now, but that's fine. Beautifully sculpted. I don't know if the red paint has already started to fade. I know some of the Bandai metallic red can fade very quickly, but it came out of the box like this. I got it a while back, but I just opened it. These joints are squeaky too, but that's okay because I feel there's very little resistance in them. And one thing I really like, and hold on just 1 second. Okay, so yeah. So one thing I really like about this figure is that you can turn him into Excel form. It's not going to change the colors of the light pipe or the tubing like it is in the show, but you can change the colors. You can change the figure into the Excel form with the broken chest, and these pieces open up. The way they do it is actually not extremely toyetic. It's much more integrated into the design, and you're supposed to pull them off and move everything around so that it looks like it does on the show. Everything is on joints. It does recommend in the book not to move it like a transformer, like to parts form it. And you just put everything back together with the pieces in the right orientation. I'm sure you could do it. It is a little tricky to get it, but you see underneath he has the broken chest, and you can get them onto his shoulders. You can do better than that if you aren't holding the camera at the same time that you're doing this, but it's really neat. I like it a lot. I found his accessories. They were on this book, this Dragon Ball comic. This Dragon Ball comic is actually a double. I bought a bunch of doubles used from Book Off so I can frame them. I have, for the Japanese volumes, I have a first print run from 1 to 42 that I've had since I was a kid. But when Book Off stopped carrying these for a while, and I had started a project where I was going to put some of my favorite covers into little feather grain wood frames. They look like this, but they're longer. They fit the manga better. And they just started carrying them again. All right, yeah, so his accessories can go on there. He also comes with a bunch of stuff in the box. He can make a bazooka out of the case. It's a really neat figure. I mean, it's a shame about the joints. I don't see myself putting him into super extreme poses, but I mean, now we've got the movement. We just didn't get rid of the squeak. He hunches good too, which is good because you can put him in that thighs leaning on his knees pose. Big figure, nice and chunky. But that really is the basics of what I will do when I'm fixing a figure. I don't come into it immediately knowledgeable. Like, I don't immediately know what I'm going to do to fix the figure. I need to mess around with it for a bit first. And that's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes it works out great, like it did with the Shinkocho Seiho Kamen Rider Black. And then sometimes it's like this. It's just a process, and the whole time we're trying to get it to work. See, my goal when I do this is I don't need the figure to be like super duper Spider-Man jumping through the sky poseable. I like nuanced poses, so I need it to be able to move in little increments. And if I can get that without it feeling like it's going to break, then that's good. And, you know, I know people make fun of like collectors and say, oh, they're ham hands when they break something. But like sometimes it's just like, you know, the tolerance of a piece of plastic, you know, the tolerance of a joint, and you just can't anticipate when the regular usual force is going to break a figure. Man, I wish this was not on with the flash, because this is really just a nice looking figure. Anyway, next time we do a fix, I'm going to do it the same way. This was not an accident. I'm not fumbling through this because I don't know how to make a video about fixing a toy. This is the process, and I want to show that process, and I want to talk through it. But maybe next time we'll see more complete success. We'll say this was a 70% success. We got the joint moving, and that's really the most important part. The squeak is annoying, and it is concerning, but we are not going to have to worry about the piece breaking if A, it can move without too much force, and B, we know that it is something that needs to be babied. But next time we'll see. All right. If you watched, thanks for watching.